Good afternoon. My name is Matt Howard. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Virtru. I'm here today with my colleague, Dana Morris, to chat about some interesting and exciting news that we've had at Virtru here in the last couple of months. Dana, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
You too. So I've been with the business now a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I remember when I joined the company, seeing how Virtru had a number of large enterprise customers that were sort of deployed at a modest level, but not deployed sort of at massive scale across a very large, sophisticated enterprise. We recently had some exciting news at Virtru where that changed. I'm curious to kind of big picture, get your perspective on what it's like at Virtru deploying our technology in support of one of the world's largest banks, for example.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. It's funny because a lot of the process actually just becomes planning. The actual software bits themselves were relatively straightforward, but probably months of planning. I think one of the things that's really interesting is, working with large banks, how they tend to take a very methodical approach and really try to think about balancing both the sort of, compliance concerns of the bank and the user experience concerns of their end users. And in particular, with this large enterprise, that was kind of the crux of their focus for probably 3 or 4 months of just planning in terms of how can we make the policies simple enough and scalable enough to really protect the bank, but do it in a way that the users really don't have to do much at all, and really kind of do that centrally.
And so let me just level set the playing field for those who might not be familiar with the details of Virtru. But at our core, we're helping small, medium, and large enterprises protect sensitive data that's commonly shared via workflows like email, file sharing, SaaS applications. And in this case, we're talking about one of the largest financial services organizations in the world deploying Virtru across several 100,000 people, all of them employees of the bank, but sharing sensitive information via email workflows with arguably, millions of people external to the bank. So there's both the sender, which is the employee of the bank, as well as the recipient. I'm curious to get, Dana, your thoughts. When you say user experience, how much of it is about the employee of the bank versus how much of it is about the recipient or the partner of the bank?
Yeah, I think the impetus for this particular organization working with us started from our external customers' experience with our current solution is terrible. I mean, those were their words, right? Their surveys from their customers, their reviews on app stores and other things with the technology that those customers were interacting with were universally poor. And in fact, it had reached a sort of a headwind, or kind of a tipping point when a couple of very large, particular high wealth organizations or end users basically gave feedback and said they were going to move on from that bank to another bank because they hated the experience. So that's what led to this organization reaching out to us. Now, once they decided to use our technology to solve that problem and make it really easy for the external parties to actually access encrypted data, then they really started shifting their focus to say, now that we feel like we've got a handle on that through Virtru, how do we make sure that our internal employees' experience when they're trying to send encrypted communications is equally simple and scalable and auditable and just all the things that they need to worry about on that end? So it's kind of a really interesting, starting point of, hey, what is the external person's experience? And then, okay, let's not lose sight of the internal people as well. And I really like that balance.
Yeah, I do too. And I think one of the things I keep coming back to is, as you know better than I do, it's pretty easy for people to encrypt information. I mean, I would argue that the bank's prior solution to Virtru was actually pretty easy for their employees to encrypt information. The real pain, if you will, was how partners of the bank or external recipients struggled to kind of decrypt the information. And as we step back and think about the bigger problem across large enterprises, anyone can encrypt information. It's making it really elegant and really simple for someone to receive encrypted information and to decrypt it without any hassle is part of the ultimate value that we're bringing to the table for this organization. Would you agree?
I would agree. I definitely think that their mindset continues to be focused on that problem because obviously terrible user experience in today's world for your customers typically results in a declining business, not a growing business.
Right. So a couple of other things I just want to put into sort of perspective for everybody that might be watching this. I mean, it's super exciting for me to be part of Virtru and see our technology get deployed at just this very, very large scale for this very, very important enterprise globally in the economy. As I think about that, there's some other very cool things happening beyond just making it elegant for a partner of the bank to receive and decrypt information. There's some very neat policy controls that the bank is now able to apply with Virtru's core technology, things like revocation and other policies. I'm just curious, like, how do you sort of, beyond just the recipient experience, how do you think about policy that's getting applied?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the encryption piece is obviously essential. You got to have keys around the data that gives you some of that control. But then it's a question of what obligations do you put around people interacting with that data? How do you enforce those? And how do you audit those? So the policies that this particular organization has put in place are actually relatively straightforward in terms of not getting into a really complex if-then-else kind of condition. And basically saying that, everything that is leaving the bank is going to have a certain expiration period, meaning that after that period, people can't access it anymore. It's going to have a certain, it's going to prevent forwarding, for example, so that there can only be a back and forth communication. You're not having proliferation of that information into other parties' hands. And then, really trying to make it simple for both the person at the bank to just, if they want to trigger the encryption, all they're really deciding is it on or off, and then the policies take hold at that point. And then externally, the same kind of thing, saying, here's the policies we've defined for our interactions with our customers, and we're not really going to ask the customer to make any decisions either, other than to just reply back. And then because that's all kind of routing centrally through our email gateway product, it gives them a lot of control centrally, and then also they can audit centrally. They know what's happening with that data, who's accessing it, how successful that process is being.
Yeah, and you think about all of the different vendors that this organization could have gone to help them solve this very, very large problem. And what's kind of cool is, they selected Virtru, and they did it after a really rigorous assessment of the market. And, we've touched on two key things right now. Again, I'm going to emphasize for the benefit of anyone that's watching this, any vendor arguably can encrypt. It's a special vendor like Virtru that can make the decryption experience elegant. The other thing I want to emphasize is, not everyone makes it really easy to apply policy around the data. And it's another example of where Virtru does some very compelling things with respect to the value add, which is in policy management that's simple, scalable, and value add to the bank in this particular case at scale. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think the other thing that really stands out to me, Matt, is like we talk about email and we tend to focus on the type of content as this broad thing. And they're all email messages, but not all email messages are created equal in terms of value to either me as a customer of that bank or the bank itself, right? So for example, I would say, you or I buying a house, I would say that the data I'm exchanging with an organization to get a mortgage, I consider that to be quite valuable. I don't really care if it's an email message. To me, it's a mortgage application. It's supporting documentation. It's my passport, my pay stubs, my tax returns. I mean, if that data falls into the wrong hands, basically somebody can steal my identity and take me to the cleaners. Versus, you and I sending an email back and forth about lunch is not really something that I care about encrypting, but even if I did, it's pretty low value. And what's interesting with this bank is while they're rolling out a email gateway from Virtru, and they're doing that across a whole bunch of different applications and aspects of the bank, most of the cases where they're applying the technology are their highest value data. Just so happens that it's email as the exchange format, but the data itself is way more valuable than a simple email message.
Yeah, 100%. So when you think about that, I know it's early in our sort of journey with this particular enterprise customer, but certainly as an organization, we've sort of view ourselves as, leading innovators in data-centric security for, email, file workflows, and SaaS workflows. And so it's not just email, but email oftentimes is the primary sort of collaboration workflow where sensitive data is exchanged. But increasingly, as just large file sharing, for example, becomes a key workflow, or SaaS applications like Zendesk or Salesforce or Slack even become sort of key collaboration points for exchanging sensitive information. The ability to sort of apply the encryption that we talked about earlier, and the ability to apply simple policy controls around that sensitive data exists regardless of the quote unquote collaboration channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of the, like, kind of going back to my earlier point, I've never liked the idea of just calling it email encryption.
Yeah.
Sort of calling it email and just focusing on the type, it would be like saying, calling Salesforce a database. Yes, it is a database. But the data that it's writing there is incredibly valuable. It's data about your customers, or to your point, you said Zendesk is another use case, right? That's valuable data you're exchanging with your actual customers. Just so happens it might be stored in a database or a text index, or it's a file or an email, but who cares about the format? It's about what's valuable here, right? What am I actually exchanging with you? And in this case, what's nice, one thing that is nice about email as the sort of communication medium is that there's established standards like SVP, so it's very easy for us to plug in encryption and policy control in a very seamless way that doesn't doesn't interrupt the normal flow of the people that are actually sending and receiving emails. So it's just a really nice combo of protecting high value data through a well-known kind of standard and really giving you ultimately visibility into how that data is being accessed and used.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, it's we're a vendor, and I know in my day-to-day life, I generally take, vendors sort of with a grain of salt a lot of the times. And I say that as a chief marketing officer. But I do want to emphasize sort of the empirics of this too, because we say it's really elegant and simple and easy for people to receive and decrypt information. We're now several weeks into this massive implementation for this very large global enterprise, and they're sending huge volumes of protected emails to these partners external to the bank. And if someone is struggling with an email and they're having a difficult time opening it, they're going to contact a help desk, which is ours, and they're going to ask for assistance. I'm just curious, what's that look like, the volume of tickets that are inbound at this early stage, just based on the volume? And, it's one thing to say that it's easy. What's the data telling you?
What's interesting is, so right now, this bank is averaging around 150,000 protected emails per day. Mm-hmm. So we're up to over 2 million since we went live. And in that time, I think we have maybe 1,000 tickets total. So the volume is relatively low. There are a couple, obviously, like any other rollout, where you have a couple of particularly like weird kind of situations with browsers and caching and all the things you can run into at scale when you start talking about a diverse population of people on like old Windows versions and old browsers and such. But for the most part, the ticket volume is incredibly low, considering how much data we are protecting. And generally speaking,
and across so many different, organizations and humans.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you start thinking about the number of people you're touching there and the diversity of operating systems, browsers, technical skill, ages. I mean, you got to figure a bank is probably sending email, encrypted email to people that are teenagers that have their first credit card account, possibly, all the way up to, advanced senior citizens who are like, 80 plus and dealing with retirement accounts. And so the massive kind of breadth there of people and devices is pretty staggering. And so I think, yeah, we're pretty proud of the fact that the ticket volume has stayed as low as it has, given that diversity.
Yeah. And to me, it's just one of those things where, you don't have to take our word for it. When you see an organization like this go to this scale of an implementation with this breadth and depth of coverage across that horizontal population of people with very diverse technical skills, to see that ticket volume is, I think, proof positive that our recipient experience is truly, truly elegant. and another great reason that we continue to see so much momentum in the business. I know you and your team worked really hard to kind of, prepare for the implementation, and again, at this scale, it's arguably one of the largest we've ever done, maybe the largest. But, aside from sort of the things that you would typically imagine being kind of, important to cover with respect to an enterprise deployment like this, the technology itself kind of worked as advertised. I mean, no real surprises there. The Gateway product is very proven, very battle tested in the wild, so to speak, across many, many, many thousands of customers. And so, I'm just curious to kind of get your perspective, like different from the technology, the actual implementation and working closely with all of the different IT teams at this big bank, how do you view that balance between implementation, I will say process versus just technology?
Yeah, I think technology-wise, the Gateway product is relatively straightforward, and even in this large enterprise, that piece of it was actually fairly straightforward. The bigger risk, I think, for the rollout on the customer side was simply a lot of the networking changes that happen when you go live and you switch email traffic and routing from kind of one place to another. That's always just inherently risky, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a gateway or whatever you're putting in there, a new VPN, you start touching network traffic, and it's always risky. But that went off relatively without a hitch. Policy-wise, incredibly simple, no real challenges there. Most of the work as the go live was happening, and then in the first week or two, has really just been when you're switching over from one system to another, like this customer did at scale across 400 applications, across 300,000 users worldwide with 3 data centers. The real challenges have just been like all the little use cases that were implemented over many years from these custom applications where maybe they were actually doing something incorrectly. And for example, Virtru's Gateway really sticks to the RFC really well. And so maybe there was some app that wrote an email incorrectly and was getting away with it. And now that they've switched to the Virtru system and it's following the RFC strictly, perhaps they're finding that the app has a little bit of an interruption. They got to make some changes on the app side. So there's been a lot of that kind of work of the combo of process and technology working with line of business applications to get them fully switched over and make sure everything's moving smoothly. The team on the bank side has been able to do that relatively quickly. So in most cases, you're talking about them seeing an issue, correcting it within 24 hours, and very little interruption to their workflow, to the business unit, or to the customer.
Yeah. And you said the word, I think smooth is what comes to mind. Again, being part of the team here at Virtru, it's just really, really impressive. I've been in this game a long time, and to see something of this scale get implemented like this at this type of an organization with this type of smoothness all the way around is testament to you and your team and the software that you guys have built. So congratulations on that for sure. I think we're at time now, but just again, super interesting story that kind of speaks for itself in terms of where the Virtru technology is and the value that it's bringing to the real world every single day. And appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I hope anybody watching this reaches out if they're looking for a similar journey. Like, I'm happy to partner with them.
That's awesome. All right, Dana. Thanks, man.
Thanks.